Hello again, everyone. Edwin Learnard back once again. In this YouTube astrological segment, I'm going to be talking about transit Neptune, square opposition, or in conjunct one's natal Pluto. Now, when we're talking about transits that involve Neptune, they can be about dreams, fantasies, inspiration, self-sacrifice, ideals, and also things that may be unrealistic and not attainable. Now, the thing about this transit is a transit Neptune when it's basically making an adverse aspect to natal Pluto. Now, I'm going to elaborate on that. When I say basically adverse aspect, of course, squares and oppositions, those transits, those aspects are negative and adverse in astrology. Now, the inconjunct aspect, though it's neutral, neutral aspects can have good and bad qualities in them, and the thing about it is also coupled with the fact that an inconjunct can also be about an adjustment or transition. And of course, those things can cause some tension and exasperation. So therefore, I see this basically collectively as an adverse transit. Now, again, when transit Neptune is basically making an adverse aspect to the natal Pluto, it may manifest in the dreams, the fantasies, inspiration, self-sacrifice ideals, things that may be unrealistic or not attainable. Those things may actually conflict with control and power, matters connected with control and power. You might be maybe some issues, over control and power are not realistic at this time. It might be where you're not inspired as much as usual to have certain control and power in your life. If you have it in the second house, if you have your natal Pluto in the second house as an example, that could be power, control in your finances, your possessions, your resources, and it might be where either you're not inspired to have that at this time, or maybe you don't. It can be a situation where what you're trying to do to attain that might not be realistic, whether it might be some money making scheme that's just not going to pan out. Whatever it might be unrealistic. And the thing is, Pluto is also connected with crisis, and it can be a time too where you might be having to sacrifice maybe for other people, and it might be derailing you in your efforts to deal with a crisis that might be connected with you that you have to take care of, or you might not feel the inspiration to deal with it at this point in time. Neptune energy can be it could be lethargic, relaxing. Neptune is connected with sleep. It might be a time where you might feel like just sleeping the matter off rather than have to actually go out and confront and deal with it. Now, the thing is, Pluto is also connected with support, which can encompass a number of things. It can be moral, emotional, or monetary support. And when you're talking about the Neptune, it might be making basically the adverse aspect to natal Pluto. It could manifest in what the support that you want to receive might not be realistic, may not be attainable at this point in time. You might not feel like you have the energy to even give this to other people at this time, because this could be about support given and support received. And it might be where maybe you could be overextending in some cases. You might be sacrificing too much of yourself, your time, to be to show some, even if it's just moral, emotional support, to express benevolence toward others, expressing some kind of support at this time. And Pluto is also connected with rebirth and regeneration. So it's also a transit where if you're trying to figuratively resurrect say like a career as an example, say if the natal Pluto is in the 10th house, it might be a time where it might be more difficult to do this, because again, going back to inspiration, you might not have robust inspiration at this time to do so. It can be a situation where you're trying to sacrifice too much for somebody else, to put your time in to revive some kind of business or whatever it might be, or it just might simply be unrealistic at this point in time. Now, the Pluto is also connected with crime and corruption, so it might be more of a period You got to be careful about fraud and deception at this time. Again, you're talking about basically, the adverse aspect in transit being made to Pluto, and Neptune is connected with deception, duplicity, and fraud. It's also imprisonment and incarceration. Pluto is about crime, so you just have to really be guarded against, whether it can be simply just being victimized in a crime, being the victim of a crime. There could be a greater propensity for that. Remember, Neptune is connected with victims. And the thing is, and also too, for yourself, in the remote chance, if you're planning on doing something criminal or corrupt, it can be a very negative time for that. And remember that Neptune is again connected with imprisonment and incarceration, and that's the kind of thing that could curtail somebody from doing some kind of criminal act. And the thing is, the thing too, as well, when I look at this transit, I mean, Pluto's about transformation. And the thing is, if you're trying to make some kind of, it might be harder to make a spiritual rebirth at this time, or spiritual transformation, I should say. Neptune is connected with spirituality. Again, Pluto is connected with transformation. I'm not saying that if you have this transit and you're trying to go through a rebirth spiritually, and it's that time, I'm not saying not to do it, because you still want to do that if that is something that you believe in, but the effort might be more laborious. It might be harder to actually do that at this time. Remember, Pluto is connected, with crime and corruption. And if it's somebody that has this, let's take a remote case, somebody has this transit and they were living what they saw as like a corrupt existence. Again, Pluto is connected with corruption, and Neptune is about spirituality. It can be a time where there could be a very strong, especially the opposition, the tug of war going on. At the time of this video, transit Neptune is going to be opposing a number of people that were born with Pluto in Virgo in their natal chart. And I'm one of them. I don't know if it's actually making the opposition by the orb, as far as the orb goes, but it's pretty close right now to me, because I have my natal Pluto in Virgo, and transit Neptune is currently in Pisces. Anyway, the thing about this too, anatomically speaking, Pluto is connected with the colon, the prostate, the bladder, the reproductive system. Those things, might be, harder to diagnose, or you might not, if it's a time where you feel, you need to get it, looked at. Maybe you don't have, the desire or motivation. Neptune is lethargic energy. It's interesting, that I was talking with someone recently, about, having my own colon and prostate checked, and again, I'm having this transit either opposing my natal Pluto, or it's very close to an opposition, and I just haven't taken the time and the energy and have motivation to that desire to actually do that at this point in time. But I know it needs to be done, and not to procrastinate on it. So the danger is the people that are having this transit, and if it's something that they haven't gotten checked, because again, the Pluto is connected with the colon, the prostate, and the bladder, and also the reproductive system. It's something that may need to be checked, but it's maybe harder to do because you just may not have that have that motivation, because Neptune is very, it's about fatigue, tiredness, sleepiness. You just really you might not want to get it done, but it may be something you still have to try to fight through and get this taken care of in a lot of instances, I'd say, if you haven't had that looked at yet. Now, another thing is that Pluto is also connected with death. And the thing about this is, it can be a literal death. It can simply be like a figurative, like death and ending, like an obliteration of something. And it might be a time where you don't have maybe that inspiration. You're not inspired to end whatever it needs to be ended. Needs to end at this point in time. If Pluto is in the 7th house, it could be a relationship. It might be a battle with an open adversary. You may be able to end, whether it's through legal means or what have you, but you just don't seem to have maybe that fight or that drive in you at this point in time to do so. Hold on a moment, people. Sorry about that, I'm back. But anyway. And the thing too is that Pluto's also connected with insurance and taxes. Again, going back to the inspiration, it might be harder for you, as far as if you might feel fatigued or sleepy or lethargic to take care of these matters. It's also, keep in mind, Neptune is about escapism. So if there's anyone that's having this transit that's trying to avoid the taxes, if they owe taxes, it might be harder to do so because Neptune is about escapism, but it's making, when it's basically adverse transit to the Pluto, it might be harder to do so at this time. And of course, I encourage everybody to do the right thing as far as that goes anyway, but the point I'm making is there's somebody out there that's actually trying to avoid that, and they're having this transit. I think it'd be harder for them to do so at this point in time. And also, Pluto is about deep research. And the thing about this is that, again, going back to, the fatigue, the tiredness, you may not really feel like doing something, looking deeply, or whether it's just even going online, trying to research somebody, it's a criminal record or whatever it might be. And also could be greater propensity, I want to say, for some kind of insurance fraud or credit card fraud at this time, because Pluto can be connected with insurance. I would say credit cards as well. And Neptune is connected with deception and fraud. Now, anyway, let's say another way this transit may manifest, it could be sacrificing you may do may conflict with what you strongly desire at this time. Say if the natal Pluto is in Virgo and the 5th house is an example, that desire which you want could be extrapolating, perhaps in analyzing, which is Virgo, could be sports data. Again, I have Pluto and Virgo in my 5th house in my chart, and some of you may know I'd be doing those the NFL football prediction videos, and sometimes I may try to extrapolate some data for the the upcoming week, and it's something that I truly enjoy. But anyway, also another way this transit may be expressed, it could be doing some, it might be a situation where if you're dealing with chaos, it might challenge making a major change or transformation. Let's say, as another example, if the natal Pluto is in the 4th house, it could be transforming the home or doing something with, you could say, if it's in Sagittarius, it could be like a partition, or maybe adding like an extension, expanding the home somehow. Also, too, lethargy may adversely affect, going back to the deep research, or if you're doing any investigating at this time. Say if the natal Pluto is in the 3rd house, it could be you might be trying to look into some background of a neighbor or a cousin or a sibling at this point in time. And it might be where you just don't really have that, and feel like having the energy. You might feel more like daydreaming, fantasizing, as opposed to taking action in that. Now, also too, if there's any issues with the feet, the toes, the lymphatic or immune system, those things might be a greater propensity to have a negative impact on some kind of control in your life. Say, going back to Pluto being in the 2nd house as an example, it could be having control over your finances, your possessions, your resources, and also too, as well, if anybody here sees this video and they're involved in drugs or alcohol, and they're having this transit especially, those things may have a greater proclivity to exacerbate issues with the prostate, with the colon, or the bladder at this point in time. Anyway, people, that will conclude this YouTube astrological segment. Until next time, Edwin Learnard saying stay well.